if this is the first time we're on the call together, my name is Alay Yajnik. I'm the founder of Lawyer Business Advantage. I'm a law firm growth expert, author, and speaker, and so excited to have you with us here today to talk about the systems blueprint. Systems are interesting. A lot of times when I work with clients, they are really focused on implementing systems in their law firms. The idea is you've got a set of systems that really enables your law firm to work really, really well. So we're going to get into talking about how exactly to put those systems in place for your firm. And let's get it started by actually turning some of this over to you guys. What are some of your challenges with regards to implementing systems? Go ahead and just type into the chat box. Russell says, making the time to implement them and figuring out the best way to implement them. Awesome. Yeah, it's hard because it actually takes some time. And then if you're just going at it from ground zero, it's hard to figure out what to do. So you end up spinning your wheels a little bit, trying to figure out, okay, well, what systems do I have to implement and how do I implement them? And all the while it's taking up time that you don't have. So yeah, it can be a big time suck if you just try to go into a cold. Kari says business development and knowing what systems to implement specifically for that. Yes, business development, first thing, Kari, I have to applaud you on. Business development is a system, and you've recognized that. A lot of times that goes unrecognized, and people think business development is just a set of kind of random activities that you do, but having a system in place for biz dev makes it a lot more tangible, to the point where you can actually measure the results of your business development efforts, which is critical to improving success. So with that, let's get into the opportunity. So the first thing is when you implement systems in your practice, you're actually unburdened and set free in a way. So instead of constantly being stuck in a learning curve where you're trying to work things out time and time again, trying to solve the same problems over and over and over again, your business gets more efficient. The solutions to those problems already exist, and so it's much easier to implement, which makes your business much more efficient and your practice much more efficient. The end result of that is you can do things better, faster, and cheaper than you could before. So that's one of the benefits. The other benefit is when you actually have a system that works well, it provides you information on how well it's doing. It kind of operates a little bit like a dashboard on a car. So it allows you to prioritize where you should focus your efforts, because you're going to know the benefits that each improvement is actually going to give you. It's kind of like if you see a check engine light on your car, you should do one thing. If you see a low oil light on your car, you should do something else. If you see a low tire pressure warning on your car, you need to do a third thing. So when you start seeing those indicators, it really helps you figure out where you need to apply your focus. And because you're not as distracted, you can actually take that improvement and work it through to its conclusion, right? Because there's no bright, shiny objects at this point. You know where you need to apply your efforts. You can work the improvement through to its conclusion and, hey, actually get the benefits of the improvement. Saves you time and you get a return on your investment. The other thing that should happen is when you have systems running, your law firm should just run smooth, right? It should run with a nice, again, to use another car analogy, the engine should be running with a nice soft purr, and the car should be moving forward. So instead of being stuck in the mud, working really hard and churning away for every inch, you're just going to cruise forward and build momentum as you go. Because now, instead of it running just like an individual's practice, you're now running your law firm more like a business. And that business is going to be run like a well-oiled machine. The result of that is you get out of firefighting mode if you want. You can step back, you can take a big picture approach on your firm, you can get out of the day-to-day, and you can pull exactly the levers you need to pull to propel your business forward, because now you're operating as a business owner. You're not just operating as an attorney. And it's that kind of big picture thinking, that kind of strategic thinking that's going to allow you to add 6 figures to your revenue. And that's going to allow you to take a 3, 4, 5, 6 week vacation, whatever you want to do. Because now you're operating from a big picture perspective. You're operating with the right information, and you know what needs to be done in your practice to get the improvement that you actually want to see. So a quick question for everyone here. Love for you guys to chime in. Just type into the chat box. Let's take 2 benefits. One would be a six figures to your income or revenue. And the other is taking more time off from your practice, like taking a 2-week vacation or a 4-week vacation, but significantly more than you do now. Which one would be more valuable to you? Would it be money or would it be vacation? I'd just love to hear. Julie says money. Tara says vacation. Russell is not making a choice. Money first, then time off. Love it. And there's no right or wrong answers, of course, but it does help you focus on the benefit of putting in systems. So you can tune your systems to bring in more revenue, or you can tune your systems to take more time off. Yeah, Russell, exactly. Yeah, you did prioritize. Excellent. Yep, money first, then time off. Well done. Okay, so in terms of implementing systems, there's 3 keys that we need to cover, and then we're going to actually go through a little working session on identifying systems in your firm and then coming up with how to actually what a system looks like on paper, so you guys can take that back with you. So the first key is to really get clear if we're working on a process or we're working on a project. And the way I define those is a process is something that's repeatable. It happens routinely in your business. An example would be client intake, right? Happens all the time. A project, though, is a special one-off kind of thing. So when we're talking about systems, our systems focus on the processes. Those are the things that happen over and over again in your business. We don't want to create a system to focus on a project because it happens one time or it's really, really specialized. And so trying to systematize that is just going to be a waste of our time. So we want to focus on the work that gets repeatedly done over and over. Preferably those things that happen the most often, because that's where we can really unlock efficiency, unlock value, and save you time. So we want to focus on the processes, not the projects. The other thing we want to do is, we want to make sure that things are getting done properly. We're going to, at times, delegate ownership of some of these processes and systems that we put in place. So it may not necessarily be you that's responsible for doing and executing a system. However, it's important to note that just because you delegate something, whether it's to a virtual assistant or to an associate or to your admin assistant, whatever it happens to be, delegation is not abdication. We need to make sure that the process is actually performing as it should. So you need some feedback and you need some measures of performance. So you'll need to review those regularly, either weekly or monthly, typically, and we'll show you how to do that. Just want to bear in mind that once you have a system in place, it's going to be really tempting to say, okay, I've got this system, I'm giving it to somebody else, and I don't ever want to see it again. Which is fine, but you have to make sure it's running properly. Okay, and third point, bear in mind the 80-20 rule. So a process that's really performing really well, it should be consistent. So it should give you the same result every single time with little deviation from the expected performance. Like if you go into a fast food chain of your choice, let's say McDonald's, and you order a hamburger, it's going to be the same hamburger with the 2 pickles every single time, right? That's a good process. So there's few exceptions. Now, one thing that can get challenging when you implement a process is you want to take that system and make sure it covers every possible situation that could possibly happen. If you do that, you're never going to be able to implement a system because it's going to be way too complicated. So instead of trying to anticipate every possible thing that can come up, when you're creating your system, design it around the 80% of the issues that happen. Okay, not the outliers, not the 20% weird exceptions, but design it around how things are supposed to go, a typical kind of situation. That's how you're really going to be able to get efficiency with your system. If you focus on the 80% that happens kind of routinely and not worry about the 20% that happens as outliers. So of those three, I just want to get a sense for which one is most important and impactful for you. The first one is using systems for processes, not projects. Second one is trust but verify. And the third is taking your systems and using Pareto's law to focus on the 80%. Which one do you think is most impactful for you? Is it 1, 2, or 3? Just go ahead and type it in the chat box now. Russell says right now, number 1. Julie says number 3, Pareto's law. And those are the two most common ones, by the way. We usually get into number 2 once it actually gets time to implement and delegate the system. Kari says number 3, awesome. Okay, so with that being said, we've gone through some of the keys to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and get to work. Okay, you should be able to see my my worksheet here on your screen, and we can actually draw on this live. So I'm going to need your help as we go through this. What we've got here is we've got 3 different areas of your law firm. One is client acquisition. The second, billing, collection, and retainers, keeping those retainers full. And the third is quality control, making sure that you're providing consistently accurate and high quality work product. Of those, let's take client acquisition first. What are some ideas you guys have on systems that you can put in place? And let's just start with client acquisition. So what are some ideas you can put in place around client acquisition systems? So here's an idea for a system. Email newsletter. That's actually a system, right? It's something that happens repeatably. Another one, client intake. Another one might be business development. And yet another one might be referral marketing. Each of these could actually make themselves into a system in and of themselves, okay? So let's move on to billing, collection, and retainers. Any idea of systems that you could come up with or that you want in your practice around any of those 3 areas? All right, Russell, thank you for chiming in with one. We've got invoice distribution. Kari says, system for reminders for payments and a limit on allowing arrearages. I'm just going to say system for, well, let's put them both in. They're probably 2 separate ones. All right. And now let's move on to quality. Oh, I've got one more there from Saja. Saja, welcome. Flow chart from first contact until the engagement letter is signed. So Saja, that's awesome. I'm going to use that for client intake, if that's okay with you. I think we're going to take that because it's got a nice start and a nice end. We're going to use that as our first example system that we're going to put together. So thank you, Saja, for providing that. Quality control. So examples of this might be a system for review of work. Any other ideas around quality control systems that you might want to implement in your practice? For me, the big one is review of work. So that's the one I'm going to go with. We'll just give people a few more seconds to type in if they have any other quality control systems that they want to implement. All right, client case status updates. Yeah. Form files, says Kari. Kari, I'm not sure what you mean by form files. Could you elaborate on that a bit? Oh, okay. Yep. Awesome. Thanks for that. All right, so we've outlined here 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 is 7. We have about 10 different systems that we could potentially implement. And there are plenty more. When you're thinking about the first system to implement, think about where you spend most of your time. And if you had a system, which one would give you the biggest bang for your buck because it would free up your time? That's where you need to focus your efforts. And we're going to go and start. We're going to use the client intake example that Saja provided to go ahead and fill this out. And we're going to use a worksheet called the systems blueprint. Now, both of these sheets, by the way, identifying your system, which is what we did here, and the systems blueprint, I'll go ahead and make those available to you on the website under free resources, along with the recording of this call. So you can download it and you can use it in your own firm. So we are going to go ahead and use this for client intake. So we're going to call this the client intake system. And I'm showing you how to do this, and you can do this for any system you want to put in place, okay? The owner is going to be Saja. Okay, now very important, when you're putting together a system, you need two things to define a system. You need a trigger and you need a result. A trigger is what tells you when to start your system, when it should be kicked off and put into motion. And a result is when the system ends. It's the outcome or the output that you expect when the system is done doing what it's supposed to do. So in Saja's case, the trigger is going to be, and Saja, please type in the chat box, correct me here if I've got it wrong, but it's first contact. And this is with a potential client. And the result is going to be a signed engagement letter. Okay. Saja, I've actually unmuted you. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
And I can hear you too. Okay. Fantastic. I thought it'd be easier to take you off mute so we could work through this together. Is that okay?
Sure.
Awesome. All right, so did we get the trigger and the result correct?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're having a first contact with a potential client, there's going to be an input. You're getting stuff that comes in. And that first contact, that typically happens, I assume, via phone or email?
Yes.
Okay. So the input is going to be a phone or email. Anything else that you typically get in that input that you have as you go into the process?
As far as very first contact, no, it's just usually a brief description of the help that's needed, but yeah, that's what the first email or phone call will entail.
Awesome. And then once you get that, what do you then do?
The first thing I do is schedule an initial evaluation. Um, that is 15 minutes long, uh, just for me to gather more information and decide if it's something I want to engage.
Got it. And so once that 15-minute initial evaluation is scheduled, what happens next?
Then I'll do a paid consultation for 45 minutes to an hour. So we schedule that as well, and that would either be in person or video conference. And the 15-minute evaluation is on the phone.
Got it. Awesome. And once the paid consult happens, what happens after that?
Uh, um, by the end of it, I should have given the client enough information to decide if they'd like to go ahead with representation, and I'll send them an engagement letter.
Okay, so they're there, in your office, or they're there on video, and then you send them the engagement letter?
Yes, I DocuSign it.
And then I don't know if there's a step 4 in this process, or if we just get the signed engagement letter back.
Yeah.
We don't need step 4. So here we've got a pretty nice process. And Saja, thank you for volunteering to go through this. We've got a nice consistent input, right? It's usually going to come in through phone or email with a brief description of the help that's needed. Most of the time, that's going to be the case. Then Saja walks them through a 15-minute initial eval by phone. Then there's a paid consult. The DocuSign engagement letter is sent, and then it is signed by the client. Okay. Saja, how's this process been working for you?
Very well, because it's kind of the sweet spot between knowing where I've always had trouble finding out where to give free hour-long consult, which is good to get the client's foot in the door. But then if they don't hire you, that was an hour gone. Versus putting up a wall of a consultation, refusing to talk to a client without receiving consultation fee. So having that initial 15-minute initial evaluation is a good intermediate step before the paid evaluation. And then if there's the paid consultation, then that will more likely lead to being retained.
Okay. In this process, right, I had you as the owner of the process.
Yes.
Do you see yourself being the owner of the process going forward, or do you think someone else could ultimately own this process?
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant that for the other attendees. That's just, I'm a solo, so I'm the only person who controls that, but I think it's replicable for anyone.
Yeah. And so if you're, and this is for other folks, if you have a larger law firm, I just want to separate the owner from the executor. So the owner of the process is the person that's responsible for making sure this goes well. The person or the people that execute the process, these individual steps, could be different people. But ultimately, there's one person that's responsible for making sure that this process works smoothly. So I'm just going to use an example of a larger law firm here and say that the owner of this process, we're going to have is an administrator. So the administrator not the attorney, is responsible for making sure the input all the way to the output goes really, really well and really, really smoothly. And the way they figure that out is they take a look at some metrics around how this process actually works. And so one term for metrics that we use is KPI. It's a fancy word for a metric or a measure of performance. It stands for key performance indicator, but it's not really all that important. The bottom line is we want to understand, how do we know when this process is working well? And so, Saja, I don't know if you have any measures around this, but do you have any way to measure how your process is working?
Um, and besides just, do you mean for all my cases together? I just look at them one by one now, just
Okay.
see if input leads to output, and if it's stuck at any of the steps, I'll check in with the client, the prospective client, and see if there's anything I can address to move it to the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're checking in, you know where all your cases are in this process, and you can make sure which ones need to be pushed forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That is awesome. And there are some tools like Clio Grow that support exactly that kind of workflow. And
Mm-hmm.
that works really well. The other way you can do it, and this is truer for larger volume cases, is you can measure number of potential clients per month that are in this process. And you can also measure what we call the cycle time. The cycle time is basically, on average, how long it takes a client to go from the start of the process all the way to the end of the process. Okay, on average, that would be your cycle time. And so if you look at those two things, if you look at number of potential clients per month, and if you look at cycle time, it can give you a sense for how efficient your process is. There's also a third metric, which I wanted to share with you, which is your conversion rate. And your conversion rate is of all the clients that enter in over here. So out of all the phone and email calls that happen, what percentage of those actually provide a signed engagement letter? And for those of you that get a ton of this input traffic, you may want to measure it from here. So of the number of clients that actually have the 15-minute phone consultation, or whatever the step is in your process, how many, what percentage of those actually become signed clients? And so for each of these, you can put in lots of different things. You can put in a target for the process. So let's say we want to have 30 clients come through every month. We're going to measure this monthly. The administrator is going to own this. We're not going to measure it. And we take action when it is less than 20 or more than 50. Okay. So what that basically says is we want to get about 30 potential clients per month coming through. We want to measure this monthly. The administrator is going to own it and take action when. So most of the time we're just going to watch the number, but if this number ever drops below 20 or goes up over 50, we're going to have to make some changes. And so that's when we get involved. Likewise, for cycle time, you can define a target. So let's say we expect a client to get from, we want a client to get from here to here in about 2 weeks. Okay. The target for that would be 14 days. We would measure this probably monthly. The owner again would be the admin. And we would take action when, and I'm just going to come up with some arbitrary stuff, take action when it is more than 18 days. Okay, what that basically says is if it's taking more than 2 weeks for a client to get from starting the process to the end of the process on average, if that number creeps up over 18 days in a month, we're going to focus on that problem and figure out what we need to do to solve it. And lastly, we're going to go through conversion rate. So conversion rate, usually, by the way, if you've got clients coming in from the initial evaluation to sign engagement letter, that should be minimum 50 to 60%. I would say over 60% for sure. So we're going to set a target of 75%. So 3 out of every 4 clients that come in for a consult end up becoming clients of ours. We are going to measure this monthly as well. We are actually going to be able to get this out of our system. So our admin can give us that information as well. And we're going to take action when this drops, when it's less than, excuse me, less than 60%. So if our conversion rate ever drops below 60%, we're going to go ahead and figure out what is going on in our process up here, what has changed to cause this problem to happen. Okay. Let's see here. Saj, I'm going to go ahead and put you back on mute. Thank you so much, by the way, for your time. I appreciate that. The last section here are follow-up actions for implementation, which are the things that you need to do to actually make this system a reality in your practice. So one example of that would be to, let's see, teach the system to the admin who's going to be doing it for you, right? And that would be, you know, you, and then we put a date down here of, let's say 2/28. Okay. And then you can come up with other steps that are necessary. Other examples would be coming up with reports if you need them, training. It's usually those two things. It's putting in reporting, which could be as simple as Excel spreadsheets, or training someone on how to use it, okay, or both. And that is an example of how you can use something called the systems blueprint to put a system in place for your law firm. What we've done today is we've gone through and just put together a real quick client intake system for a law firm. And you can see it's got several concrete steps. We have KPIs to measure how well that system is performing. And the interesting part that I hope you take away from this, it is not being done by the attorney, it's being done by an administrator. So that could be a virtual assistant, it could be a part-time assistant, it could be your admin, or even your paralegal. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. All right, looks like we've got about 20 minutes left for questions. So Kari has a great question. What kind of law does she practice, or does it even matter? Kari, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that, you know, client intake process is universal across law firms. This is one that, you know, works for her. Yours might be a little bit different, but you will definitely have a client intake process, and it really doesn't matter what kind of law you practice. What's one thing that you got away, that you're taking away with you from the call today? Just go ahead and type that into the chat box. What did you learn today, or what did you pick up, or what aha moment did you have? All right, Saja mentioned the metrics table is very useful. Yeah, the metrics are really the heartbeat of the entire system, because it tells you, it's that dashboard in your car, right? That tells you how well your system is actually performing. In particular, you know, knowing when to take action. It's great to get numbers, but the numbers have to mean something so you can actually act on it or not. Julie says, like to take action parameters so you know when to act or adjust. Yep, that is critical. A lot of systems that are implemented get down to this stage here where they come up with, their key performance indicators. They come up with their target. They understand how often they're going to measure them. They have an owner to measure them. But what ends up missing is they don't know when they're supposed to take action. So they end up looking at these numbers and they don't know what to do with them. Kari says, the system for client intake with an idea as to how to charge for consults. With a 15-minute screening. Great. I also really like the metrics tracking and how and when to act. Awesome. Thank you, Kari. Yeah, it's important to note something that I usually teach my clients. If you want to give away a free consultation, do it in that first step where it's a 15-minute initial evaluation, and do it by phone. There are, of course, folks that don't give away any initial consultations, and there are people that charge for everything. And there's other people that will gladly spend an hour or two on the phone with a client at no charge, or with a potential client at no charge. My suggestion, just as a default, 15 minutes complimentary, and do that by phone. To your point, this stuff is pretty, it's not difficult mentally. It just takes time and effort to implement it. And so sometimes you can do this on your own, or sometimes you can look to get some help. And if you're looking to get some help implementing systems, hopefully you'll consider Lawyer Business Advantage as an organization that can help you with that and put those systems in place in your law firm. Everyone, thank you so much for your time.